Samyo H, your English instructor, and today we're going to deal with Unit 19 Travel and Tourism titled Discovering West Nepal, the Wild Frontier. So let's begin.
Unit 19 Travel and Tourism Discovering West Nepal, the Wild Frontier. What do you do when you get lost along your travels? Along my 5-week walk in the western Himalayas of Nepal, a colorful rooster, heavy on pink feathers, fluffed his roseate plumes at me as though to say, "Yes, Bideshi, it's all real." The flightless bird and I stared at each other for a brief momentum, and I could have sworn it winked at me. By this point, my sanity had already gone hazy, unlike the clear blue skies above the high passes of Dolpa. Further along the trail, patches of pink grass and purple flora sprinkled the ground. Sun-dried shrubs filled the crisp Himalayan air with the familiar sweetness of chamomile. Stone houses held themselves together under a rock above a river, looking too crumbly to live in. But the inhabitants didn't seem to mind. I wondered how much more oddity hides and flourishes in West Nepal. I wasn't supposed to be in this region. But with any good story, a happy accident would see me walking through the country's unknown trails. Having been living on the road as a traveler for 4 years now and visiting Nepal for the first time, I wanted to push the envelope and experience places where few tourists go. I chose the Dhaulagiri circuit. The day I started my walk, I asked bus drivers in Beni to point me towards the direction of Tatopani. As it were, there are two Tatopani. One on the east along the Annapurna circuit, one on the west along the Dhaulagiri circuit. I would end up in the east and I would learn too late that I was on the other side of where I wanted to be. My options would be to turn back or to swim in the pickle I was in. I took my map out and decided to walk up to Muktinath. In a guest house in Lower Mustang, I met an Englishman walking the Great Himalayan Trail. We exchanged stories over cups of hot Roxy to warm our cold selves, and after looking at his map, I decided to make a pilgrimage to Rara Lake. In Darbang, I stopped to resupply food and walked towards a village named Sibang, 15 kilometers further as the crow flies, but we are talking about the largest mountain of this planet. It was a long day. From one lush green hill to another, I went Mathi and Tola, through warm temperate forests, under giant spider webs, over rapid besides grassy waterholes too tempting to swim in, if not for their stinging coldness. In a scenic village named Lamsung, a young couple welcomed me in their home where I stayed the night. In the morning, someone offered to give me a ride on his horse, for a fee, but I decided to keep using my own legs. In Bujekung, I washed my clothes and myself by the river. The Didi who hosted me for the night called Sutne, bedtime, literally go to sleep, at 7 in the evening. There was no electricity, but there was a hole in the ceiling and the bright stars lit the cold dark room up so beautifully that I didn't mind. The next day, a 10-hour walk to Dorpatan had me marching until past sunset. I had to take my shoes off to make a river crossing. I knew that the slippery rocks and angry glacial water were going to be a painful adventure. A Bahini crossed the river and took my pack, made me wear her flip-flops, held me by the hand, instructed me where exactly to place my feet, and got me across. Her girlfriends were all cheering. I said my tourist classic namaste, hugged them all, and moved on. When finally I found a base for the night, I was soon joined by the local politicians from Kathmandu who were on an official trip. The evening stretched as we all danced in the dining room, Nepali music on full blast. A village named Thankur had only 2 houses. On the way there, I had a mild heart attack as 3 large birds suddenly took flight from a tree next to the footpath. It was an arid region with not much life visible in the periphery, but these birds were large, shiny, and rainbow-colored. They were the national bird of Nepal, the Himalayan monal. That wasn't the last surprise for the day. The stars in Thankur that evening were blinding, the most brilliant I have ever seen this side of the globe. In Pelma, I met a Welshman who had been to Nepal 9 times. I met him again in Dule and we walked towards the Jangla Pass and to Dunai. The distance between the 2 villages was so long that we decided to camp halfway through the trail. I squeezed into the Welshman's tiny summer tent and attempted to sleep on 4,500-meter altitude. We laughed at the fact that no one else was insane enough to be on that mountain on a cold November night. Further west into remoter regions, school children led me to a village that sounded like Orta just after Sarmi. The village is built on brown rocks, houses stacked together with open free-fall decks. A family fed me, sheltered me, and walked with me the day after to show me a shortcut, a snowy pass towards Jumla. I walked for 5 hours in the snow and a further 3 hours in cold winds through ancient alpine forests and exposed mountain ridges. By the time I reached Jumla, I was ill with an unknown virus and a bad tummy. An American I met at a hotel gave me medicine. The pani puri at a local eatery also helped in my recovery. Once I felt well enough to carry on, I started walking towards Rara, through Kali Lagna and then Bulbule. In Kali Lagna, I was welcomed by a Didi who was picking the brains out of a sheep's skull. She said if I wanted to wash myself there is a bucket of water in the outhouse. I checked it out and the water surface on the bucket was frozen. Cracking it felt strangely satisfying and the pani underneath was surprisingly lukewarm. One more day, I whispered to myself. I was excited for the last push, thinking it would be an easy final walk. Of course it wasn't. To get to Rara Lake, I decided to take a shortcut and cross another pass. On the map, the trail to this pass was barely visible. The suggested route is a 25-kilometer walk. My chosen route was less than half of that. Oh boy. I walked through foot-deep snow for hours. My shoes and feet became wet, but the sky was blue and the sun was bright and the views were otherworldly, giving me enough to be cheerful about. Once I had reached the pass, I was in for a shock. The skinny cliff path was snowed in. There was a steep drop of 300 meters and I was on top of a 4,000-meter mountain. There was nothing to hold on to but loose metamorphic rocks. Grabbing the wrong one could be fatal, but turning back meant walking more hours and in the dark. Without tent and food, that option was only slightly more dangerous than crossing an icy cliff edge without ice axe and crampons. I dug my heels and hands in the snow, one frozen movement at a time, until I was on the other side. It was cold, but my adrenaline ran so high that I was sweating from the suspense. Imagine my relief once I've made it across all 4 cliff crossings. And so I arrived at Rara Lake alive and well, the biggest freshwater lake in Nepal. Himalaya was there, glistening in its dark blue glory, waiting for my arrival. The magnificent skyscraping pine trees decorated the ground with giant pine cones. Coots glided over the crystal clear water, occasionally diving under to disappear and resurface again. White peaks said hello from a distance. There were only 2 hotels in the national park, at least on the lakeside. It's strange to think that Feva Lake in Pokhara was once this quiet. Through a 5-week-long walk, I have covered a distance that totals up to 25% of the Nepal Himalaya via the lower Great Himalayan Trail, along with some funky detours. If I ever thought I knew Nepal and its cultures, the West shook that knowing. By and large, I would describe what I witnessed and experienced as medieval and raw. The wild western region is a step or 2 back in time, when we knew how to survive with our primal instincts, human intuition, and oneness with nature. By Megan Lim. Discovering West Nepal, the Wild Frontier. So, the author Megan, it was her 3rd time in Nepal. And, in reality, she was actually supposed to go towards the Tatopani of Annapurna. However, when she asked at the bus stations, she was directed to the Dhaulagiri circuit. So, instead of going back, there was no option, hence she decided to go forward to Rara. So, throughout her journey, she met many people along the way who had assisted her. With some, they helped her cross the river. Some gave her fooding and shelter. Some gave her medicine. Some assisted her in other ways. So when she was about to reach Rara, she decided to take a shortcut. However, upon reaching the shortcut, she realized that the shortcut was too risky. But she persevered and eventually she makes it through and gets to Rara Lake. Upon reaching Rara, she sees the beauty present there which was surreal. And towards the end, she also realizes that how human beings actually used to survive in the past by being one with nature. How we survived with our primal human instinct instead of relying on other gadgets. She also realizes that whatever perception she had of Nepal, everything was changed once she took this trip to the Western Nepal. Question number 1. Summarize Megan's journey in 200 to 300 words. I have just summarized it previously. You can take a reference from that and write it. However, please do remember to write the answers in past tense and always remember to change the paragraphs. Number 2. Like the author, have you also gone through such a situation in your life that there was no turning back? So similar to Megan's situation, she actually had to go to Annapurna. However, she was directed towards the Dhaulagiri circuit. So instead of turning back, she kept moving forward because there was no option. There are also other instances in Megan's story where she had to keep moving forward as going back was not an option at all. So similar to that, it does not always have to be related to travel, but there can be instances in your life where you might have come through such a situation that there was no option but just keep going forward instead of going back. If there is such things, please write about it. If you have any queries or questions, please feel free to email us at learning@dearwalk.edu.np. Thank you very much.